In 14 years of working with couples, I have never but once had someone reach out to me and say, everything else is falling apart, but our sex life is amazing. It literally just happened one time. And I will tell you what happened with that couple a little bit later, because it actually proves my point better than anything else. Here's what I've seen. And if you have been married a couple of years even, you might have already noticed this as well. Sex does not happen in a vacuum. It doesn't live in its own little box separate from everything else going on in your marriage. It is connected to literally all of it. And today I want to answer a question that a lot of couples are either quietly living with or loudly arguing about, so much so that the whole neighborhood can hear. Can a marriage actually survive without sex? I'm going to walk you through the one cycle that quietly destroys most marriages and exactly how to break it. I'm going to share with you the one sentence that a spouse can say that does more damage than almost anything else in a marriage when the topic is sexual intimacy. And I'm going to spill the beans on something that surprises almost every couple that I've worked with about where sex actually starts. And it's likely not how you've been thinking about it either. So stay with me, because if any part of what I just said hit close to home, this video is definitely for you. Before we get into it, I want to say something. My hubby and I just celebrated 20 years of marriage a week ago Wednesday, believe it or not. And I will tell you, despite of what most people, both in my personal and my professional life, just sort of automatically assume that being in this work, doing this work for a living, does not make you immune to the hard parts. Just like having 2 decades under our belt doesn't either. 20 years in, and I have still had to ask and answer some really difficult questions about what I'm willing to work through, what I'm willing to let go of, and what our marriage is actually standing on. I say this because I want you to know that I'm not talking to you from a distance on this. I'm not what some people would call, I think it was Alex Hermosi, I heard him say this at a conference that I was at, where he called out the 19-year-old marriage coaches, right? Everybody laughed. I am not that. I get it. I've seen enough couples over the years, hundreds at this point, come out of places so dark they didn't believe they could, to know that hard does not mean hopeless. So let's get into it. Can a marriage actually survive without sex? The short answer is yes, but your answer to that question depends entirely on what's holding your marriage up. Here's the way that I think about this. Imagine a dining room table with 6 legs, right? Strong, solid wood legs holding up the table, like the one Grandma and Grandpa used to have at their house. Are you picturing this? 6 of those. Now, sexual intimacy, intercourse being part of that, and those two are often used interchangeably, and we'll get to that in a minute. That is one of those 6 legs. So it matters, but it's not 100%. So if you take away one leg, does the whole table collapse? No, not if the other 5 are solid. Now, here's where it gets real. Most of the time, when a couple comes to me and says, Danka, we have no sex life, it's a mess, can you help? Sexual intimacy is not actually the first thing that went. It's usually the last. Something else went first. One of the other legs started wobbling. Emotional intimacy, intellectual connection, a shared sense of adventure or experience together. The sexual piece just sort of followed. That matters enormously, because if we just fix the sex, we haven't fixed the marriage, not even close. In fact, in my experience, you cannot fix the sex without addressing the other pieces first, one of them in particular. So what are the 6 legs? I'm glad you asked. I have a whole separate video where I go deep on this. I'll link the video, go watch that after we're done here. I already mentioned a couple of them, but it's 6 ways to be deeply connected to your spouse. And sex is just one of them. Can a marriage survive when that one piece is lost? Absolutely, if the other 5 are alive and well and tended to. And I've watched couples do it beautifully with grace and even a little humor, believe it or not. But a marriage where all of those legs are wobbling, that's a different conversation. What is sex actually and what is it not? Here's something that I say a lot and it still surprises people. Most couples use the word sex and intimacy as if they meant the same thing. They don't. Intimacy is so much bigger than sex, and sexual intimacy itself is so much bigger than intercourse. I think about couples navigating real physical challenges: ED, pregnancy, menopause, chronic illness, surgery, aging. And I want to say this clearly: the absence of penetrative sex does not have to mean the absence of a sex life. Do I have to say it again for the people in the back? It just looks different. There are so many ways to be sexually close, to be playful, to be physically and sexually generous with each other that have absolutely nothing to do with whether intercourse is on the table. The couples that I've watched come through health challenges and still have a rich, connected, intimate life, you know what they have in common? They didn't let one door closing make them feel like the whole house was locked up. And this leads me to something I tell every couple that I work with. So in case nobody's told you this, sex doesn't start in the bedroom. It starts in the kitchen. It starts the night before, the weekend before. It starts in the way that you greet each other in the mornings. It starts in the text in the middle of the afternoon. It starts in whether you're emotionally present with your spouse all week long. The bedroom, it's just where it lands. How connected, how emotionally attuned to one another, how seen, how valued you feel, that is what determines what happens at the end of the night. Which brings me to the part of this video that I really want you to pay attention to. There's a cycle that I see in my practice over and over again, and most couples have no idea that they're in it until they're in it pretty deep. It goes like this. One spouse starts to pull away. Maybe they feel unseen, unappreciated, like their spouse is giving their energy to everything and everyone except for them. Or maybe something happened. A comment was made, something landed sideways, right? And instead of it being addressed, it just sort of sat there and created a little distance. The other spouse then feels that distance and gets a little resentful. And the more resentful they get, the less warmth and connection they're creating, which makes the first spouse pull away even more. And round it goes, you guessed it. Now, here's the thing. When couples are stuck in this cycle, what I almost always see is one partner, usually the one who was feeling more shut out, starting to throw what I would call fits, getting more frustrated, presenting their needs as attacks, thinking that if they just say it louder or meaner or more often, their spouse will finally hear them. Newsflash, they won't. All that does is accelerate the cycle. The only way to break it is to change how you bring things up to each other. Not what you're saying, but how you're saying it. Coming from a place of, hey, I miss you, instead of, oh, you never do this or the other thing. Or coming from, I'm sad about what's not happening between us anymore, instead of, what the heck is wrong with you? That is the shift. And I know that sounds so simple. It is simple. And also, it is incredibly hard to do when you've been hurt, when you feel rejected, when you've been running on empty for months or for years. But it's the only thing that actually moves the needle. Let's go back to the question that I brought up at the beginning. What's the one thing that has the potential to cause the most damage in a marriage? I want to talk about something specific because it came up in a situation I was listening to recently, and I know that it comes up in a lot of marriages. There is one thing that a spouse can say or has said that I believe does more damage to a partner's body, their confidence, and their desire than almost anything else. I wonder if you'd venture a guess. It's these 6 words. I'm not attracted to you anymore. All right, for all the fellow linguists out there, I know it's actually 7 words. Just say with me though, I am not attracted to you anymore, or versions of it, right? I don't even want you to kiss me or touch me or hug me. You're so disgusting. Or you're dead down there, whatever form that it takes. When a person hears that from the person who's supposed to be their safe place, the person who chose them, something happens physiologically, not just emotionally. Their confidence crumbles, their body tightens, their desire, guess what? It goes somewhere very far away. Because if you've told me you don't want me, I'm not going to feel like taking my clothes off in front of you, or behind the closed door for that matter. That is not how human beings work. And I want to speak to both sides of this. If you have said something like this to your spouse, whether in a moment of frustration, whether you meant to shock them into change, whether you were trying to be honest, don't we all love the value of honesty? I want you to hear me when I say this. There's a way to say hard things to the person that you love, and that is not it. How you present something this sensitive matters as much as what you're actually trying to say. Now, can it be undone? Can you come back from this? Yes, but this is a big, fat, permanent Sharpie kind of but. It requires something real. It requires you to own it fully, not just partially, to say, I was wrong to say it the way that I said it. I should have never put it that way. Those words will not come out of my mouth so long as I shall live again. And then it requires learning a better way to address the real concern underneath it together. I want you to know that your partner's struggle in the bedroom, in many cases, is not happening in isolation from those words. There's a real connection between feeling desired and being able to show up and perform and engage in the bedroom, or whatever other spot you two prefer. These things are linked. And sometimes, oftentimes, the most powerful that can happen for sexual intimacy in a marriage is one spouse simply choosing to make the other feel wanted again. What to do when your spouse won't get help. Let me address something that I hear from a lot of spouses. They will say, I have tried everything. I've asked them to see a doctor. I have asked them to come to therapy with me or to go by themselves, and they won't. They just shut down. What do I do then? First, I want to, ever so gently, if I may, ask you a question. How is it that you're asking? Because what I see most often is that the request comes wrapped in frustration. It comes out sounding like an accusation, like it's a character indictment. You're so irresponsible. I can't believe that you won't do this. If you only cared for the family or for me, you would want to do something about this. And the moment that it lands that way, guess what? The wall goes up and you've lost them. Here's what I want you to try instead. Before you tell them what you've noticed, ask them how they actually are. What's been hard? What's been sitting heavy on them? Listen without judgment. Do we still remember how to do that? Listening without judgment. Listen without an agenda. And then, from a place of genuine care that you wanted this to clearly come from in the first place, say, hey, I've noticed this. I am worried about you. Can I help? How can I help? Can I make the appointment? Can I come with you? Notice the difference in the tone. Notice the difference in the presentation. Choice of words, all of it. It matters. It becomes a different conversation entirely. Now, there is a harder truth in here also. At some point, you have to make peace with the fact that you cannot control another person. Not the neighbor, not your sister, not even your spouse. You can love them, you can encourage them, you can advocate for them, but you have to be able to also name your limits. There's a version of this where you say, when you come home and you are in this place and you will not get help, it makes it really hard for me to be close to you. And I want you to know that. So if I end up retreating, that's why. And then let them decide what to do with that information. You are not responsible for their choices, but you are responsible for yours. Oh, and the couple that I mentioned at the start, the one that came to me with everything falling apart except for their sex life, I heard from them about 6 months after we'd finished working together. He had stopped doing the work, he had stopped following through on everything that they had committed to, and sadly they ended up pursuing divorce. So as far as I am concerned, There is no such thing as a healthy sexual relationship when all the other walls in the house have fallen down. It just doesn't exist, which is exactly why what I am about to give you matters so much. All right, let me give you something concrete. If you're watching this and recognizing your own marriage, if you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is so us, here's the very first thing I want you to do this week. Have one conversation. And in that conversation, I want you to do two things. First, each one of you rates where you are right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is, I am deeply unhappy in all the ways possible and nothing is working, and 10 being, I am more than happy and satisfied. Where are you at between those two numbers? Just name the number. No defending, no explaining yet. Just name where you actually are. Both of you do this. Then, second, each of you will name your ideal. In a world where things were the way that you would want them, how often would we be connecting physically, sexually speaking? And I want you to say an actual number, not just, oh, I just want it more than what it is right now. That's not a real answer. Here's what I found in 14 years of doing this. Most of the time, that gap is not as enormous as couples think that it is. I've seen one person say, I don't know, 2 to 3 times a week, and their partner will say once a week. And they've been treating it like an impossible divide for years. As if one of them were saying, I want to have sex once a year, and the other one comes and says, I want to have sex every day of the week and 3 times on Sunday. It is not an impossible divide like that, likely. That is a starting place for a real conversation. Then agree on a number that you can both live with, agree on who initiates, and then, and this is the part that most people skip, start building a life together where they can actually happen. Because remember, it does not start in the bedroom. In 14 years of this work, I've watched couple after couple come out of places so dark, so broken, so far away from each other, and make it. Not because everything magically got easy, but because they decided that what they had was worth fighting for, and they were willing to change how they were fighting for it. 20 years into my own marriage, I still have to do that work. I still have to ask the hard questions, sit with the uncomfortable answers, and choose my marriage again. And I will tell you, every time I do, I understand something new about what it means to really commit to another person. If you are in a hard season, if the intimacy has gone quiet for the two of you, if you feel more like roommates than partners, I want you to know I've seen this turn around more times than I can count. Now, we talked today about the 6 legs of the table. I mentioned it briefly at the beginning. If you want to go deeper on what each of those actually looks like, and more importantly, what it feels like when one of them is missing, I have a video. I mentioned it earlier. It might hit you hard. It's the truth about intimacy in a marriage, and it's not what you think. In that video, I talk about something that almost nobody discusses, the one form of intimacy that couples are completely starving for without even knowing it. And I'll leave you with this to get you curious. The absence of intimacy in a marriage is not always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet ache. The pain of saying the words, I miss you, when your spouse is sitting right next to you on the couch. So if that landed somewhere in your chest, as you just heard it, go watch that video. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. This is what we do here. Real talk about real marriages, real time. We talk about the things that are hard to say out loud because couples deserve real help. I'll see you in the next one.